Well, I'd like to take the next few minutes to talk about manufacturing in Montana and in the Missoula area, including the forest products industry. To begin with, I'd like to introduce the two folks who helped me put these presentations together. I'd like to introduce Todd Morgan, who has taken my place as Director of Forest Industry Research. Todd, would you stand, please? And also Jason Brandt, who is the Assistant Director of Forest Industry Research in our Bureau. Jason? So if you have any questions on what I say, call one of those two fellas. Okay, let's look at manufacturing. Manufacturing in Montana. Well, Montana is obviously not a heavily industrialized state, and when people think about Montana, they don't think about manufacturing, but in fact, manufacturing in Montana is a substantial industry grouping or segment of the economy, as some of these statistics illustrate. We have about 24,000 workers in Montana's manufacturing sectors. The Montana manufacturers in 2007, we estimate, produced products that had a value as they left their plant gate of some $8 billion. The workers in that industry earn nearly over $1.2 billion in labor income, and as Paul illustrated earlier, manufacturing accounts for about 20% of Montana's economic base. So manufacturing, surprisingly to many people, is substantial within the state. What is manufacturing in Montana? The first thing I'll do is define manufacturing and then maybe better define it by telling you what's not in manufacturing. Our formal definition is adding value through the mechanical or chemical transformation of substances or materials into new products. That's our definition. Maybe said more simply for Montana, if you're doing that, transforming through mechanical or chemical means, and it's not mining, it's not logging, and it's not construction, then it will likely be in manufacturing. An array of manufacturers within the state of Montana. I'm not going to spend time today detailing them in great depth. They range from heavy manufacturing, things like metals and petroleum manufacturing, through the wood and paper products industry. We have a growing high-tech sector here, as you'll see, and then an array of light manufacturers in Montana. If you'd like to get into some more specific details, we'll be glad to do that with you later. I've outlined, you will find in your Outlook booklet, a segment on manufacturing and then a segment on forest products on pages 27 through 31. That'll give you some idea what's in manufacturing and the size of various categories in Montana. And I think as I go through this, you'll get a little bit of a flavor. What I really want to do today is focus on, first of all, the trends in Montana manufacturing, some of which are somewhat surprising, and then, of course, the outlook for 2008. First of all, then, a little history. This shows employment in Montana's manufacturing sectors over the last 17, 18 years since 1990. And as you can see, the 1990s were a very good period for manufacturing in Montana. Again, measured by employment, we saw about a 10% increase in employment in manufacturing in Montana during the 90s. Value of products was up considerably. Earnings of workers were up considerably. And the factors behind that were generally good economic conditions globally and in the U.S. Decisions by a couple of entities to locate or expand major facilities in the state, and we saw growth, and in particular saw growth in high technology, electronics, and light manufacturing during the 90s. The only real decline among a major sector in Montana in the 90s was in Montana's forest products industry, and that declined by about 10% due almost entirely to the sharp declines in federal timber availability, which I'll deal with a bit later. Well, then you can see here that after a decade of growth from 2000 to 2003, we lost as many manufacturing jobs in the state of Montana as had been gained during the 1990s. Again, the reasons for those losses were the much weaker U.S. and global economic conditions, again accentuated by the 9/11 terrorist attacks. We saw a much stronger U.S. dollar develop from 2000 through 2003, which negatively impacts most U.S. and Montana manufacturers. And then recall also the electricity cost spike of 2000 and 2001 and the aftermath of that, which still impacts some large manufacturers in the state. So good performance through the 90s, and then a substantial fall off from 2000 to 2003. And that fall off from 2000 through 2003 was almost in every segment of manufacturing without exception. Well, as you've heard earlier today, since 2003, we've seen much better economic conditions globally in the U.S. and in the Montana and regional economy here. We've also seen a much weaker U.S. dollar, and again, driven by those factors, Montana manufacturing has grown consistently and steadily for the last 4 years. Employment was up by about 10% from 2003. Income to workers was up almost $200 million annually, and the value of products produced by Montana manufacturers was up about $2 billion. And even in 2007, with the housing declines that were mentioned earlier, the declines in the U.S. housing market, and declines in Montana's wood products industry, which is the largest component of manufacturing, we saw the 4th consecutive year in a row statewide of increases in manufacturing, sales value, and employment in Montana. Relatively modest, 200 to 300 workers out of 24,000, but nevertheless growth. And the same factors that I mentioned generally were operating in 07. We saw a further weakening of the U.S. dollar and strong global economic demand. The very high commodity prices that Paul mentioned were a factor, as well as were good prices for some of the specialty and high-tech products that Montana producers sell. And I also need to mention that the strength of the Montana and regional economy were also factors in 07 and previous years. Very good years, as Paul mentioned, for construction, agriculture, and mining in Montana, providing markets for a number of Montana manufacturers, and consumers in general in Montana were doing better than the national average in terms of improved conditions. So all of those things led to increases continued increases in 07. Where have the increases been in the last 5 years? I'll just, first of all, I'll tell you where they haven't been, and that's the wood and paper products industry, which has declined by about 3%, and I'll say 2%, and I'll say a little bit more about that. The largest increases, percentage-wise and in total dollar value for labor income in this case was a category that we've called chemicals, petroleum, and coal. The oil refineries in particular in Billings and Great Falls had substantial increase in activity. Those saw about a 35% increase in labor income. And then the second category is we've labeled it machinery, equipment, and instruments, but that includes a lot of Montana's high-tech manufacturers, and that is up by nearly 30% in that 5-year period. And you can see the other categories had reasonable growth in that period. Missoula County, a little bit about Missoula County. The wood and paper products industry is the dominant segment of manufacturing in Missoula County. About 60% of the wood and paper products industry, or of manufacturing in Missoula County, is in the wood and paper products industry. That has declined by about 10% over the last decade, and we saw further losses in 2007 with the closure of the Stimson plywood plant in mid-07, and other curtailments in 07 because of market-related factors that I'll talk about. So wood products has been down, and the other sectors in manufacturing in Missoula County have increased somewhat over the last 5 to 10 years, so that we've seen an offsetting of some of the losses in wood products, but not entirely. We've seen a decline in manufacturing overall of 5 to 10% if we measure it by labor income in Missoula County. And some of those other factors, without getting into mentioning plants and leaving someone out, food, beverage, and nutritional products, some of the things that Dick mentioned earlier, have shown increases. We have some aircraft manufacturing, some precision instruments here, and as well as metal and steel fabrication, and all of those have shown growth in the last few years. Let me look at Montana's forest products industry, and I'll be, for the first time this year, because of some changes in the federal database, we've removed logging from the manufacturing segment and left it in forest products. And I'll try not to confuse things too much when I talk about numbers. But so let me just keep that item in mind if need be. If you've been to our seminars any time in the last 15 years, you heard me talk about the forest products industry, you've heard me talk about timber availability. And what I've graphed here is timber harvest over the last 25 years, really. Beginning in about 1990, there was a substantial decline in timber harvest in Montana, and it had a very considerable impact on Montana's forest products industry. And I'm not going to go into the details today. I'll just simply state that you can see the blue line. The yellow line is the total. The blue line represents the largest decrease, which was in the federal timber program, primarily the harvest from the national forests, and more recently a decline in the pink line, I'll call that because I'm not sure what color it is. Decline in private lands that began about the year 2000, a decline there. Well, again, this led to major losses in the wood and paper products industry in Montana and through the 90s and into 2004 and 2005, during periods when product prices were very good. And I think timber availability is still a major concern, if not the major concern, when we look long-term at the future of the wood and paper products industry in Montana. But looking at the recent past and the current situation, market conditions are a much bigger concern immediately than timber availability is for at least the wood-producing end of the industry. Unlike many of the commodities that Paul illustrated earlier, which reached very high levels in 2006 and 2007, many wood products prices fell sharply in 2006 and 2007. This is a graph of lumber prices, and depending on what lumber grade you're talking about, these prices fell 20 to 40% from early 2006 to recent times. The reason is pretty simple, and it was mentioned by Paul and Scott. We saw dramatically lower U.S. housing starts in 2006, even lower in 2007, and 2007 levels are down by a third from 2005 levels. That's the largest use of lumber, for example, in the United States is housing prices, and that is primarily what drove this price line here. And in 2007, we saw substantial curtailments in particular in the lumber producing end of the wood products industry. We saw sales down by some $90 million. We've seen employment off by about 600 workers, and lumber production was down by about 13%. So a pretty serious situation. Now, I have a really serious concern about the forest products industry because as we look to the future, and as you heard the housing forecasts delivered earlier by Paul and Scott for the U.S. housing industry, we will be lucky if we see the housing industry recover in 2009 to any degree. And the wood products industry in Montana, especially the lumber component of it, is facing perhaps the longest downturn in the housing, certainly the longest downturn in prices since the early 1980s, and perhaps a longer and more severe downturn when we look at prices. So I'm really concerned that we will see not only curtailments, which we have seen in '07, which have been announced for '08, but also some permanent market-driven closures. The ability of the wood products industry to withstand this downturn, this long-term downturn, is something that really concerns me. Now, I do need to mention, since we're in Missoula, the largest piece of wood and paper products in Missoula is the pulp and paper mill. Their prices, relative to lumber prices, for example, have been reasonably good. Their difficulty results from the fact that they depend on sawmills which produce lumber for their byproduct or residual chips, and in a down lumber year, they have a shortage of raw material, even if their markets are good. So the pulp and paper mill in Frenchtown doesn't quite face the same problem that the sawmills face with markets, but this impacts their operations as well. So let's look at the future. We do a survey of 200 plus largest manufacturers in the state and some other selected manufacturers in the state to give us a representative survey, a response, representative grouping of manufacturers in Montana. And we survey them in late November and December, and we get information on major issues, on the recent past, and on the outlook. So some results from that survey. First of all, let me say, related to today's theme and some of the discussion that we've had today, somewhat surprisingly last year when it appeared, but it's reinforced again this year, labor-related issues ranked well above other issues, including energy costs, even with $3 a gallon gasoline and $3 plus a gallon diesel fuel. Labor-related issues ranked well above those in terms of importance to manufacturers in Montana. Health insurance costs actually ranked first, followed by closely by shortage of qualified workers, and then immediately followed by workers' comp rates. So the issues that we've been discussing today are forefront in the minds of Montana manufacturers. I will also say that we had a number of open-ended comments from manufacturers in Montana related to workforce shortages, and had some specific comments that the shortage of qualified workers had impacted seriously their growth plans for the future. So our outlook for Montana. Well, I was surprised that manufacturers in Montana are fairly optimistic about 2008. Now, this was in November and December. It was before some of the recent gyrations in the stock market, but we saw 47% of the manufacturers in Montana projecting that '08 would be better than '07, and only about 14% projecting that it would be worse. So that, coupled with some of the forecasts that we've heard from Paul, leads us to project modest growth in manufacturing in 2008. That's not a very brave forecast. Potential upside of it is that there are a number of new projects, fairly large projects, underway in the state of Montana. I won't try to detail them now, which could move that modest to something more than modest. So absent a severe unexpected economic recession in the U.S. and globally, and given that the large downside risk in the forest products industry isn't quite as bad as it could be, then our forecast is for a reasonably good year for manufacturing in Montana next year. With that, I'll stop and be glad to take questions. Comments? Yes?
Where's the growth in food and beverage coming from? Specifically, I'm wondering if it's related to food processing on commodity items or non-commodity items.
In Missoula County?
Well, statewide, it looks like 800 jobs in the last 6 years and pretty large increase
Okay.
in income.
I hate to dodge a question, but I'll be glad to get together with you and talk specifics about exactly where in what components of food and beverage that is in. I'm not sure I have the data with me now. Anything else? Yes. Question is, do I have a reason to think there will be more timber available to the Montana's forest products industry? Is that there? I will say there should be, with the kind of activities that Dick's talking about, with the need to do a lot of treatments on our forest lands. There should be, but I think that's been recognized for a few years. There are some groups coming together, like Dick's group and the Beaverhead Deer Lodge folks working together to try to move some projects forward. But I'm not overly optimistic. I'm more than a bit pessimistic about the future timber availability. It would have to come from federal lands. The inventory on Montana's private lands is not sufficient to support an increase. In fact, that's why you saw that downward trend in the last 5 years or so in the private harvest inventory constraints. I could take one more quick question if there were one. Yes?
How much of that downward trend is timber availability in private land linked to the sale of that land, conversion of that land into real estate?
The question is, how much of the decline in the private timber harvest is due to the sale or conversion of that land to other uses? And I think historically very little. It certainly is on industrial lands in the state of Montana, which are some of the, well, I think the harvest rates were clearly had to decline before there was a lot of activity in terms of subdividing, especially large industrial land ownerships. So I don't think, I think it's more the stock of timber growing rather than a shift in use. That's not to say in the future that could not change. Okay, good. I better stop there. And then get on to our last presentation. We save the preeminent spot on the program each year for the Missoula Area Chamber of Commerce. And first of all, I would like to introduce a couple of people from the Chamber. Kim Luttrell, if Kim is still here. Kim, thank you. And Gary Backey. Yes, Gary, would you stand, please? I'd like to thank the Chamber for their help in developing these seminars. And we have a speaker from the Chamber. We have with us today the Director of Business Development at Community Medical Center and a board member on the Chamber's Executive Committee. Would you please welcome Karen Sullivan?
Thank you. Good afternoon, and TGIF. Thank you to the University of Montana and First Interstate Bank for their annual sponsorship of the Montana Economic Outlook Seminar. I am here today representing the Missoula Area Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber's board chairman, Jack Chambers, was unable to be with us today, and Chamber Executive Director Kim Luttrell asked me to say a few words on behalf of the organization. I'd like to report first in mirrored commentary likely to be delivered by President Bush this coming Monday evening that the state of the Missoula Chamber is sound. 12 years ago, Missoula Chamber membership stood at 400 business entities and individuals. Today, the Chamber is Missoula's largest business organization, with almost 1,000 business members representing more than 19,000 employees. The Chamber's solvency is the result of the financial support via annual dues of the organization's members, many of whom are here today. With continued growth and sustained membership, we are able to offer sound benefits back to our business community. A few updates. Recently, the Chamber undertook a survey of its membership to determine the issues of most import to area businesses today. Workforce loomed as the #1 issue facing our businesses today, certainly an issue reflected in this forum's theme. Montana's low unemployment rate, recently touted as the lowest in the country, is a statistic that we're proud of. But that low rate also presents challenges, as you well know. Many of our businesses simply can't find workers to fill necessary and critical roles. In the Chamber survey, businesses told us they are challenged in recruitment efforts for a variety of reasons, including our region's high housing costs. I know we at Community Medical Center, the number 2 private employer in Missoula County in terms of number of employees, we are hindered by the local high cost of housing in our recruitment efforts. We think it's literally a shame that people like X-ray techs, not to mention firefighters, social workers, police officers, can't afford to live in our town. And we feel it's an ethical issue that we need to address as a not-for-profit. As the Chamber has delved deeper into what our members were telling us about workforce, we also learned that local businesses are challenged by the fact that younger workers are engaged by work issues vastly different than the ones we older workers find important. Young members of our society aren't willing to sacrifice lifestyle issues for their work. They watched as their parents worked more than 40-hour weeks. Though the younger generation wants a high income, they also want structured hours so that they can pursue family and recreational interests. And who's to say they're wrong? We as employers need to determine how to work with that mindset and leverage it in our recruitment and job place scenarios. The Chamber is helping by featuring a job seekers corner on our website, MissoulaChamber.com. This portion of the site is used to feature our area's top jobs and to give prospective employees and employers a portal to learn about positions and the businesses that provide them. The Missoula Chamber continues to be an advocate for business. 1 year ago, we created on our staff the role of business advocate. Our advocate, Gary Bakke, who was introduced 1 moment ago, is the former owner of Missoula's Bakke Tire, a former Chamber board member, and past chair of our Community Affairs Committee. Gary monitors local and state issues that have impact and potential impact on our membership. On these issues, we feel we're much more proactive rather than being reactive. When fees, ordinances, zoning, taxation, and other issues are being talked about, the Chamber is there in those forums to monitor the discussion. And often, we will take an official stand, always representing the interests of small business, primarily the interests of the struggling small businessman and woman. The Chamber's new website is receiving daily hits from prospective new residents and business owners. Our new associated database allows us to work more closely than ever with various entities, including the Missoula International Airport, an entity we're working with to stabilize airfares for businesses and prospective businesses whose bottom lines are often tied to frequent air travel. We at the Chamber continue to be very involved in the Bitterroot Resort issue. We have partnered with the Missoula Area Economic Development Corporation to sponsor an analysis of the resort's economic impact on our region. That analysis is available to the public on both the Chamber and MAEDC websites, and the Chamber will endeavor in the coming days to collaborate with MAEDC to establish consistent policy positions with respect to the resort and its development. There are many more issues with which the Chamber is involved, but time precludes elaboration. Let me close with one last issue, leadership development. I am pleased to announce that this year the Missoula Chamber is celebrating 1/4 of a century of leadership Missoula. We are in our 25th year and couldn't be more delighted with this important endeavor. Thank you so much for including your Missoula Chamber in today's presentation. I wish for all of you a relaxing weekend with family and friends in our beautiful city and region. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Questions for Karen?
They want to eat.
Okay. Oh, good. Thank you again, Karen. And once again, thanks to the Missoula Area Chamber. Well, there's an organization within the Montana University system that has as their major focus assisting Montana's manufacturing businesses. The organization is located in the College of Engineering on the Montana State University campus. You heard me refer to them earlier, and that is their organization is Montana Manufacturing Extension Center. And they employ 8 field engineers who around the state who assist manufacturers in things like increasing productivity, managing cost, and generally improving their processes. So for our luncheon program today, we're pleased to have with us the director of the Montana Manufacturing Center and one of their field engineers that he will introduce during his talk. So to talk to us about how Montana companies have and can respond to workforce challenges, would you please welcome Steve Holland.
It's really strange when your cell phone starts vibrating just as you walk up on stage. Most of the speakers are shorter than I am. We're going to do things just a little bit differently today than we have in previous years. Instead of just introducing the local field engineer, we're going to have that field engineer come up and talk with you, so I'll introduce Craig in a minute. Laying around the various tables, there's 2 things I'll just call your attention to. One's one of our newsletters that has things in it that kind of give you specific examples of the sorts of things I'm going to talk about today. And the really big difference that I want to do today from previous events is ask for your input on business issues. So I've got those on the table, so just making you aware that they're there. If you've realized that you had this thought that says, gee, if they would only, and then fill in the blank, business would be better in the state, well, fill in the blank for us. We'd like to begin to gather data and ideas and that sort of thing, and see what we can do with those. I want to make a couple of quick introductions also. We've got a very large and active advisory board. 2 of our members joined us today, and they're so supportive that they left for other meetings at lunch. But Jerry McConnell and Larry Hall were here earlier, and so I appreciate their longstanding support. And a current board member is right here, Pat Barkey, is one of our board members serving to make sure that we keep tied together carefully with the Bureau. So, Pat. And I want to acknowledge Chuck, who for the last at least decade, I don't know Chuck, has been serving on the board in that stead, so I thank you as well. With that, I'd like to introduce Craig Warrist, who is our field engineer serving this area. Craig's office is up just down the hall from Paul in the Gallagher building, and so we thought we'd give him a few minutes to talk to you about sort of what's happening in this region. Craig?
Charlie Wright just asked for a list of Missoula and Ravalli County food and beverage manufacturers, so I was firing off an email to him. I just can't find the help. That's one of the most frequent frustrations I hear when visiting manufacturing companies, and Karen Sullivan and Chuck both alluded to that. I'll briefly highlight several ways local manufacturers are addressing the problem of recruiting and retaining employees. Even though you're not in a manufacturing business, for many of you out there, I think you'll find that a lot of these will be applicable techniques that you can use. So this is going to be fast. I've got 5 minutes. Hang on. 1, partner with schools for employment needs. Local manufacturing clients are using the Missoula College of Technology to fill their welding positions. 2 other clients are hiring machinists from the College of Technology in Helena. These manufacturers are making their employment needs known and gaining a favorable hiring position by meeting instructors, donating equipment, and hiring summer interns. 2, cast a wider recruiting net. Several metal fabrication companies have reported having difficulty finding computer numerically controlled machine operators, or CNC machinists. These companies have expanded their search area by advertising in the large western metropolitan areas like Seattle, Portland, Salt Lake, and Denver. One company targets the Rust Belt, areas of Detroit, Chicago, and Cleveland, for experienced help. One of their recent hires came from Ohio. Several clients are using internet postings to advertise position openings. I'd like to give a plug to Julie Foster, the Valley County Economic Development Association Executive Director, who has developed a website, montanajobs.net, that tries to target Montana job openings for Montanans who are employed out of state and want to get back home. On a related note, I just checked yesterday, and the domain name weneedwarmbodies.com is still available if you'd like to register that one for your job openings. 3, customized training. Companies are identifying their job needs and developing or contracting for specific skills or training development. One Hamilton area manufacturer recently made headlines for receiving a $400,000 community development block grant from the Montana Department of Commerce to train 53 new workers. CDBG grants for customized worker training and training provided by the local job service are frequently used to prepare employees for new positions. Training is one of several strategies that can be used to develop and retain existing employees, which leads me into my next topic of retention. Improve employee retention. Turnover costs can be 30 to 50% of the annual wage of an entry-level employee. The true employment cost for a worker earning $7.50 an hour is roughly $10 an hour with benefits. The cost of turnover for a $10 an hour employee will range between $8,000 and $13,000. To roughly figure out what turnover might be costing your business, count up your W-4s for last year, subtract your current head count, and multiply that by 10,000. It's important, therefore, to create a work environment that holds on to employees you already have. Management and supervision are key factors that influence the work environment. Factors under their control include making sure clear work instructions and expectations are set for employees, providing proper tools and time to do the job right, listening to and cultivating employee input, letting associates know their contributions are appreciated, and many more. First Break All the Rules is a great book to pick up additional tips in this area. One other recommendation is to conduct exit interviews, find out why employees are leaving, and address the problems that might be highlighted in that area. Number 5, provide incentives for employment referrals that stick. Some manufacturing companies are offering employees significant dollar incentives when that employee refers an individual that sticks beyond a certain retention period. You can use the cost savings from improved employee retention to provide these incentives. 2 final comments. In manufacturing, one of the strategies to correct a problem is to change the design of the product or work process so a defect can't be created. What I'm going to be talking about now are along these lines of delaying the need or preventing the need from having to hire another employee. Use lean manufacturing techniques. My organization does a lot of work with companies on lean manufacturing and the implementation of the Toyota production system. While originating in manufacturing, these techniques find use in healthcare, banking, construction, and government to streamline operations and eliminate waste. By eliminating waste, companies can avoid all the extra steps and associated headcount necessary to fix processes that don't work. Use of automation is another way to improve efficiencies, and by automation I'm not just talking about processing equipment, but use of computers to streamline administrative processes also. Where would we be without Excel spreadsheets and word processing to help speed our work up? Imagine 30 years ago triple typing carbon copy paperwork and sending it out via snail mail. I'll be happy to talk in more detail with those who might be interested in this subject matter after the seminar, because my short 5 minutes doesn't really allow me to delve into this much longer. The last one I want to talk about is outsourcing. This has a bad connotation because frequently this is thought of as going overseas, which indeed some manufacturing companies are doing. Others, however, have partnered with local suppliers for their outsourcing needs. Opportunity Resources, for example, the local Missoula Sheltered Workshop, has contracted with American Eagle Instruments to package American Eagle's dental handpieces. Opportunity Resources is also available for doing packaging, labeling, sorting, and other light assembly work for other manufacturers and other businesses in general. So if you're having trouble finding help, I've just identified 7 different strategies that local manufacturers are using to solve their workforce issues, and I encourage you to try to use some of these also. Thank you very much.
All right, if you look at your agenda, you'll see that it's 12:30, so we'll have you out of here by 12:50, based on the agenda. Let's talk now about the general manufacturing community's response to the quote-unquote skilled labor shortage. The Manufacturing Performance Institute conducts surveys and publishes an executive summary each year. The 2007 report summarizes findings for 2006. The summary is based on the responses of 798 manufacturers who report that employment levels and revenues were projected to keep growing through 2007. But many indicators point to an inability of manufacturers to maintain or improve margins even as the revenues improve. Labor turnover at many facilities continue to drain expertise, resources, and profits. Many plants were expecting to increase hiring in a competitive labor market. They also realized they need to do more to retain experienced employees. Yet training efforts and adoption rates for human resources best practices have stagnated. Many plants are doing little to invest in their workforces. So they're facing competition for human capital. Lean improvement methods, Craig mentioned, lean manufacturing, Six Sigma, the Toyota production system, have become the de facto improvement standards for majority of manufacturers. Despite this, 20% of plants still have made little or no effort to adopt or implement any improvement methodology. Manufacturers are paying more for materials and are barely keeping their non-material manufacturing costs in check. And even those plants able to pass these expenses through to customers have to wonder, how long will customers put up with these cost increases? So the manufacturers are facing competition for materials. Customers are looking for high quality, service and support, total value, and fast delivery. Fortunately, most manufacturers in the United States understand this competition for customers. And we're in this competition today globally. Let's contrast this just a little bit with Montana. In the study, 43% of the plants had fewer than 100 employees. In Montana, about half of the companies who have employees have 4 or fewer employees. The data indicated that plants with fewer employees tend to train less than their larger counterparts. This is consistent with the finding that the Bureau found in a manufacturing survey completed last year under the Montana Wired Grant. 71% of the plants reported their employees received more than 8 hours of training in 2006. Nearly 10% reported training their employees for more than 40 hours during that same period. Paul Polson and the Bureau conducted a study of manufacturing in Montana for us during 2007. The research discovered 3,100 manufacturers in the state. Only 1,300 of those 3,100 have employees. The other 1,800 are no employees, sole proprietors, S-corps, so forth and so on. 3 years ago, we attempted to assemble a list of all the manufacturers in Montana. Our list had 2,600 employees, or companies, excuse me. After Paul's research suggested we were missing 500, we continued the research. The result is a book that has 3,700 companies listed. We're still working on what the difference is. It's proven somewhat of a moving target because of the dynamic nature of business. So we're continuing our research and to try to have as current of a list as we can have at all times. Trend in manufacturing employment has been essentially flat over the past decade, and as Chuck mentioned earlier, it's up about 10% in the last 4 years. And as Chuck noted, there's about 24,400 workers in our state who currently earn about $1.2 billion a year in manufacturing. Returning to the 3,700 manufacturers, here's a chart that shows the distribution of those. Now, these are the companies listed by county. This is not employment or size or anything like that. This is an entity, each entities. And you can see in that chart that about 80% of the manufacturing firms are listed in the 18 counties that are in that blue color or whatever it is. And you can kind of see where the dominant places are, the numbers of manufacturing firms there are by county. That group of folks right there, as Chuck noted, put out about $8 billion in output. Chuck, I think that was in 2006. Is that what you said? 2006. Other good news about this, we exported about 10% of all that manufacturing goods. We exported about $780 million of manufactured goods in 2006, 3/4 of which went to just these 4 countries, Canada, Japan, Germany, and Taiwan. And as has been noted today, and Craig noted, the prevailing issue that we hear has to do with low unemployment causing upward pressure on wages and the shortage of skilled labor. So the question becomes, how are we dealing with those issues? The issues of low unemployment, upward wage pressure, shortage of skilled labor. Before we talk about that for a minute, let me just say it's going to get worse. We have low unemployment now, but the baby boomer retirement will greatly impact the workforce. Industry Week reports that according to a survey by Robert Half International, nearly 1 out of every 2 senior executives said baby boomer retirements will have the single greatest impact on the workforce over the next decade. So the big question becomes, is your company prepared for when the baby boomer generation retires? Some companies undoubtedly will use the strategy of just waiting for unemployment to rise and hope that that can solve the problem. Probably not a very good strategy. Referring back to the Manufacturing Performance Institute survey, we can look at what the response has been in the manufacturing sector in the United States and in the manufacturing sector here in Montana. 3/4 of the plants report that output has increased in the last 12 months. That's innovation coming to bear and creating capacity. Productivity among the U.S. plants, which is defined as dollars in sales per employee, was a median $174,000 in 2006, which surpassed the mark in 2005 of only $150,000 per employee. So productivity increased in 7 out of 10 plants. So innovation is increasing productivity. Average manufacturing cycle time, which is the start of production to the completion of a product, has decreased about 15% over the last 3 years, resulting in an increase in capacity. So innovation is coming to bear to increase capacity and performance. Machine availability, which is defined as percent of scheduled uptime, increased from 75% in 2003 to 81% in 2006. Again, innovation bringing increased capacity, increased productivity, and increased performance. Innovation, investment in technology, investment in the workforce, drive capacity, productivity, and performance. And they set the stage for growth. And there's good news here in Montana. Montana ranks the highest, at number 1, among all the states in the nation for entrepreneurial activity according to a 2006 Kauffman Foundation study. Manufacturing output in Montana is up from $5 billion about 3 years ago to $8 billion in 2006. Manufactured exports from Montana tripled since 2003 and now make up about 60% of the $1.3 billion exported from Montana in 2006, flipping a historic trend of 60% agricultural commodities, which, by the way, the exports in agricultural commodities were up also. During this period of increased output and growth, the manufacturing jobs essentially remained flat when you compare them with the dramatic rise in output, suggesting that a significant increase in manufacturing capacity, productivity, and performance took place during this last 3-year periods in Montana's manufacturing firms. Doug Hall is the founder of the legendary Center for Innovation Research called Eureka Ranch. He's a former panelist on ABC's American Inventor, and he's going to be the keynote speaker at our conference in October. And like that cool ad that I just shoved in there. That's going to be right here in Missoula, by the way. He notes that although 6 in 10 firms are looking for ideas to cut cost, 8 out of 10 firms need ideas for growing sales. He goes on to say that in today's economy, everyone needs to be thinking about growth through increased sales. Explosive top-line growth by selling more of what you make, selling to new customers, selling into new markets, and selling new products. What we see happening in Montana is exciting. Our entrepreneurial, innovative small business owners are rising to the challenge of today's economic reality. They're using technology, creativity, and innovation to address their business challenges, just as they've been doing for generations. For example, Diversified Plastics, a second-generation family-owned business just down the street from here, manufactures plastic parts and designs solutions for industrial applications. The company recently invested in a huge state-of-the-art injection molding machine. It has a 700-ton clamping capacity that can produce plastic parts that weigh over 7 pounds, considerably larger than the company's other molding machines can make. This has opened up opportunities in several key industrial markets that promise future growth for Brad Reed's 46-employee company. The expectation is that they will increase sales by 9 to 13%, somewhere around $250,000 a year. Does this negate the need for skilled labor? Of course not. In fact, innovation and labors aren't the only factors that we have to worry about. As we drive innovation up, as we use more technology, the skill level required by those employees also goes up. So it all kind of interacts. But this is where I want to bring in the third thing that we have to worry about, and that's the environment in which we operate. The regulations, the laws, whatever, that are out there that affect all of our businesses. So that's where, if you have any good ideas that you can feed us that we can work with, please jot that down. Leave it behind for us to pick up. And if you're willing to have us call you to talk to you about it, go ahead and put your name and email address on there. I can't promise that we're going to go out and change the world, but if we don't know there's a great idea there and we can't get it to the right person, we certainly have no chance of changing the world. So please take a moment to do that. And the last thing I'd like to do is recognize again Chuck Keegan and Paul Polson for their years of service, and it's been great working with the two of you. So if you'd join me in, once again, thanking the two of them.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it very much. We appreciate your being with us very much. Steve will be glad to take some questions if there are some. Questions, comments? Yes? The question is, there appears to be a relationship between the number of entrepreneurs, maybe an inverse relationship, and the skill of the workforce. There appears to be, but I'm not sure I have an answer.
I don't know data. It was suggested, I would agree.
Yes. Other questions? Comments? Yes. Is there any intention to expand MMEC's staff?
we're working on it. That's the question of funding as always. In fact, we're in search right now for our 9th engineer. So we're working on it.
Anything else? I need to say that they have an incredibly capable staff and do amazing things for manufacturers. And if you're a manufacturer, I suggest you get a hold of Steve and his field engineers. And if you're not, a lot of the suggestions you heard from Craig and Steve are applicable to, as Craig said, not just to manufacturing, but to any business.
Let me add to that many of you in this room are not manufacturers, but you have clients who are. So a lot of this stuff becomes relevant to you, and referrals are appreciated, but if you're a CPA, banker, whatever, lots of people that are your clients are manufacturers. So that's why I think this is a good audience for this.
Good. Thank you again, Steve. A couple of items, please, if you would take a moment to give Steve some information on the yellow card and leave that out on the table as you leave. Again, our evaluation sheets, we'd appreciate it if you would take the time to fill those out. I want to thank everyone for attending. I know I'm retired, but as Arnold said, I'll be back. Thank you.